see the second hand, so I don't know what's going on.
The Muscatine City Council will come to order. Good evening, welcome everyone. We'll begin this evening, as always, with a roll call. Fran?
Councilmembers Lorette.
Present.
Fitzgerald.
Present.
Natvig.
Present.
Shahade.
Present.
Bynum.
Present.
Phillips.
Present.
Spread.
Present.
All present, Your Honor.
Thank you, Fran. Would you please rise and join me in our Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If there is anyone in council chambers this evening that wishes to talk to council about an item that is not included in tonight's agenda, now would be the time to come forward to the podium and give us your name and your address. Very good, we'll move along. Item number 5, consent agenda. The following items are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes item 6A, items 8A through C, item 9A, filing of communications 12A through B, and tonight's bills totaling $1,066,666.20.
Mayor, I'd like to pull 8C from the consideration.
You're requesting to pull 8C from the agenda?
Is it 5C?
5.
Pardon?
Petitions and
5C.
community. It's items, it says items 8A through C, so it'd be 8C.
Okay.
Petitions and communications, under that section. You can sit corrected too.
Are you making the motion?
No motion necessary, just that it gets requested to be pulled, it shall be pulled.
You're saying 8C, Phil, you'd like to have that pulled?
8C, the request to approve MDA boot
Okay.
drive.
All right.
It's listed under bullet point 5, so that's what's confusing.
Do I need a second for that, Greg?
So that's what I meant.
No motion.
No second motion, okay. Okay, we will pull 8C and then review that in its order on the agenda. Now, is there a request, pulling 8C, a request to approve the consent agenda as noted?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Second, Tom. Any discussion, council? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, one item that, before we get to, yeah, let's do 8C. That's in the order that it's supposed to be. The request to approve MDA boot drive August 31st, 2013 through September 2nd, 2013, and at the Muscatine Soccer Complex during Muscatine Soccer Club's Fall Classic Tournament. Probably out of order, but we need probably discussion first.
Yep. Go ahead.
Are you making a motion now, Phil, or?
Well, I would just, this is a request to approve, and I would request that we deny this because we have a letter in our background information from the person that's in charge of the Fall Classic that they feel that they really don't want to have the MDA boot drive happening at their event in their soccer complex during that time frame, and that they've offered up other opportunities as suggestions. And I would offer up one that I think the mayor could give some firsthand knowledge of, is with a big semi-tractor trailer at a certain business out on the north side of town. You probably have collected numerous items and fair amount of cash by being on private property. It's more than one day, obviously. It takes a fair amount of work on your part. You've done an excellent job at it, and I just would like to see the fire department try something like that rather than using the city streets, or basically horning in on an organization that is paying to use the soccer complex, and they're wanting to jump in and stand there with their boots. I just think that's wrong, so I move that we deny the request.
Is there a second?
Mayor,
Mark?
first of all, I would certainly agree with Phil's comments to the fact that we have information here that the soccer club would rather they were not at the soccer complex for that event. And frankly, that's a little different information than we received at the last meeting, where at least, and I asked the question, I was told they would be working with the event director. So that's a little different than what I was led to believe at the last meeting. I know that at the last meeting, we had another motion that Mr. Bynum suggested that we let them go out and do this in the streets the way they always have. The problem I'm having is that this discussion has gone on for 3 years now. For 3 years. This is not something new. You know, there's been time to plan this. And basically, unfortunately, with the confusion over last meeting, I feel like council has some responsibility, or at least the city has some responsibility that you know, I don't know why we were led to believe the soccer club wanted them there, but
Can I clarify that real quick for you, Mark?
Yes, please.
Right. This is a different event that they've requested to be at. The first one was the College Search Kickoff. The College Search Kickoff event, folks, were okay with trying it out this year. They've asked for a different date, which is a different event, the Fall Classic, and it's a different event organizer for those dates. So you got two different events.
it doesn't sound like they're on board with this.
No, this time, no. The previous College Search Kickoff, well, we're okay with trying it out. The Fall Classic would prefer not to have it ongoing during their event. Two different dates, two different events.
Well, outside of city council. I volunteer. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus. And last weekend, we did our CPID drive. For those of you maybe more familiar with it, it's called the Tootsie Roll Drive. You may have seen us out there with the Tootsie Rolls. We do it once a year. We do it Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We don't even fill out all our shifts. And we raise some pretty good money for the kids. And I know the fire department is very dedicated to this cause. I have no doubt if they did something similar, they would fill up their shifts. And if you did it for consecutive weekends or maybe a week, I'm sure you would raise the $15,000 that you're looking to raise. However, that was not planned this year. No planning was done to make that happen this year. And so what I'd like to do, willingness to compromise here, I would like to make a motion to amend the request. And the motion I would like to make is that we will amend the request to such that the fire department is allowed to conduct the MDA boot drive on the streets as they have this year. With the contingency being that next year it is planned for private property. Next year, this request does not come back here. It is planned for private property. That is the motion I would like to make.
I'm compelled to ask, Mark, what makes this year any different than last year? And before you respond to that, my hat's off to the Muscatine firefighters. The team that goes out there and sacrifices their time and really puts themselves in harm's way, although probably not as serious as fighting a fire or in an attempt to rescue and save someone's life, is extremely important. And having some experience in that kind of a scenario, I can more than appreciate your efforts. But what makes last year or this year any different than last year, or even the year before? Now, the year before, I wasn't a part of the meeting that Greg had with firefighters, but I was a part of this meeting last year. And the message to me was clear, whether I agree with it or not. The message was clear, just as clear as the message this year. So again, just point counterpoint, I don't see the difference between this year and last year.
Mayor, I'm not necessarily going to argue with your point. I'm really not. What I'm saying is I thought we had a compromise at the last meeting. I thought we had something scheduled, set, it was approved. For whatever reason, I still don't understand the reason that was pulled. But now this request, the soccer club doesn't want them there. I don't even understand why this request is in front of us when the group that's involved in the event has said, well, we really don't want that. And if you talk to the firefighters, they don't really want that. We have a request in front of us that nobody wants.
Well, just to clarify, in fact, Darren, if you would come up to the podium. After last week's council meeting, I took a little bit of initiative on my own that Phil was referring to, and I called the store director at Hy-Vee Food Store, and I asked him specifically if he would be in favor of the firefighters being on his lot doing their campaign, their boot drive. And he very excited immediately about an opportunity to help out. Now, my question, did anyone follow up with that? Because I know I sent Greg an email, and I know he forwarded it to you, I believe.
Yes, myself and Tom Summit, who's our committee chair. And Tom has made contact with Hy-Vee. We've also been in contact with Muscatine Community College and trying to do some fundraising with them. They've also got some money to help us get started with it. So we're looking at all different, ways that we can assist with trying to make additional funds for what we're going to be losing not being in the streets.
Well, I'm certainly not a genius fundraiser, but I've done pretty good in a 12-year history, and I make one phone call to one food store, and there's 3 other food stores in Muscatine that I see jumping on that bandwagon, so that's a total of 4 phone calls, one of which you don't have to make because it's already done. And I don't understand, I guess for my own satisfaction, why your team isn't moving forward with that.
Well, and to get back to when we were approved to do the soccer tournament, the 27th, 28th, 29th, whatever it was here last weekend, the issue we ran into was a time constraint because that weekend prior to, Tom Summit, our committee chair, and myself both ended up having to go to St. Louis for a medical examiner's conference. So we were gone the entire week. We didn't have any opportunity to plan anything because we'd only given that from the council meeting night until that weekend. And then, of course, last weekend also we had our CPAT testing for the fire department. So any members that weren't on shift at the time had to be in for overtime to run the CPAT testing. So we just had nobody available to do any fundraising at all. And so a lot of that was just up to when we got back from our conference down in St. Louis to start making contacts and phone calls. And again,
So it was a matter of work and or training scheduling
yes,
that interfered with the original date.
yes. Yeah, because it was short notice. It was kind of a miscommunications, I guess, between us when we originally were told, of the date when we called over here to City Hall, and I'm not a big soccer person, so I don't know one tournament from another. So the date we were given, of course, was the end of August, 1st of September. Fine, that'd give us enough time to get some things planned and put into place. And then after the council meeting, we find out it's July 27th, 28th, 29th, whatever it was. And it was just the fact that we had nobody available to do it, and not enough time to get things put together for it.
Would you be receptive to my suggestion?
Of,
Hy-Vee,
oh yeah,
Walmart,
and
Fairway, what's the other store out there? I don't mean to shortchange anyone, but we have 4 grocery stores in Muscatine. food is a necessity.
Yeah.
So people go to one of those 4 locations.
Aldi. Aldi's the other.
Yeah,
Aldi's,
and
yes.
again,
Aldi's,
we have-
Aldi's.
we have started making contact with them to, to see about what they would allow to be done there, so.
And that's what I was talking about earlier. As a member of the Knights of Columbus, that's what we do with our CPID drive, and we do very well. But to Darren's point, I would say that having some experience in organizing these events, generally speaking, there's at least a 2-month lead time on this, because you've got to be able to have people that can clear their schedule and know ahead of time, I have to volunteer for this. And then you also want to be able to market the fact that you're going to be out there. So, I mean, if this is something you think you could put together in a couple months and pull it off this fall, I would agree with the mayor. But if you can't, I would be willing to do 1 year with the stipulation, again, that next year it's the store.
Mayor, I would like to second his motion and call the question.
Phil's
I'm
motion?
not sure the body of the motion at this point. Mark, do you want to clarify that for us?
Well, again, my motion is that this year, the fire department is allowed to conduct their drive, as they have, on the streets. This being the last year that happens. Next year, the stipulation being next year it is conducted at the stores or another plan on private property. This does not come back to city council. Private property does not require council approval.
Right. Okay, and you are seconding that motion?
Yes, Mayor.
I would have to say that given the fact that everyone knows the fire department does the boot drive or some type of drive, advertising is not a major problem. And doing that in 30 days or less wouldn't be a problem for them to organize and do it. My wife and I used to do state marching band contest with 30, at the max, there was 38 schools that came to Muscatine. We had over 125 volunteers come in that worked all over the city. Chief Coderoni was even there one year because his daughter was involved in band. That was the only year we got rained out. Probably shouldn't have asked him, but organized that. Basically, it was put on. I'm the one that made all the phone calls, and with a union organization, those phone calls aren't a problem. You have people within your organization. You talk to them every other day, depending on the schedule. I think they could pull one off at Hy-Vee or one of the grocery stores, especially since you've already covered the Hy-Vee's location for them. I think they could make it work. We keep the comment. We said no, and we keep yes, when it comes down to the wire because somebody hasn't done what they need to do. They think they're going to go ahead and get approval just because they're here again, and we're going to go ahead and approve it for 1 more year, and then next year we'll still have that 1 more year happening. And I know for a fact, for 12 years, I didn't realize it was 12, but I knew it was for quite a while, you've done an excellent job. I think you have probably as much knowledge in fundraising as anybody here. So,
Don't remember seeing you at the Hawk Truck, Phil, but that's probably because you're on the other side of
That's
the
all
state
right.
there. State. Anything else, Phil?
no, that's all right.
I called the question, which I thought was no further discussion. I'd sure like to see the vote happen.
If I may, don't you need a date? You're going to do this?
Well, I think they already scheduled a date.
Shouldn't that
I
be
mean,
part of your
would
motion?
it be the same date as this, or would you be?
No, that was just set because of that tournament going on.
So you would need to schedule a different date.
Well, the dates that we had originally kind of looked at doing were August 14th, 15th, and 16th. It's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
And that's for if you were working the intersection.
Yes. Mhm.
Are you including those dates in your motion then?
If that's the dates, if that's firm, I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, because that's usually our dates that we have each year that we do it are usually right in the middle of August, and it's usually the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So that's the 14th, 15th, and
I
16th.
respect your request to end discussion, but since the city's getting so much negative press on this already, that I'd like to resolve this and resolve it tonight. So
Also,
I'm
the
going to
city
leave.
council has well received a lot of negative
Absolutely,
vibes too.
absolutely.
And we'd like to get it settled as well.
So the floor is still open for discussion. Anyone?
Mayor, I'd just like to say that, well, first of all, before we mentioned that last date, I was thinking we could pass this and you could still try to pull off the Hy-Vee and the other things, but maybe
Oh, no,
that's,
we're still going to attempt to do
so
those.
that's a possibility. But I didn't mention it last week, but I was disappointed with the firefighters that they did have a year to come up with some other options. And I wasn't wild about the soccer option because if I was going to another town for a specific event, I don't see that as the
Yeah,
typical.
it wasn't exciting for us either, so.
But given all of this, I could support this because I want to move forward with this. But I am disappointed that over, actually more than a year, there weren't some better alternatives developed.
Anyone else, council? Fran, the best that you can do, can you read the motion?
Well,
Do you want me to reiterate it?
If you would,
Okay.
just so council's clear
The
on your
motion,
motion.
the motion that I am making is that the fire department will be allowed to operate their MDA boot drive this year in the street intersections as they have on the dates of August 14th, 15th, and 16th, with the stipulation that this is the last year, next year they will be at the stores or whatever. If that doesn't work out, whatever other private property plan they come up with, but this does not come back to city council.
And we have a second by Councilman Bynum. Is this a voice vote?
well, I think we're gonna probably be best off doing a roll call vote, Mayor.
And I would agree with that.
Mayor, may I ask you one other thing? Do you need like our designated times or the request for having the lights at the intersection of Lake Park and Park Avenue set to flashing like we've had in the past? Does that need to be put into the motion also?
You need to coordinate that with NPW.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure it doesn't have to be put in the motion.
And I have one question for you, Darren. Are you the president again next year?
Yes.
Okay. Can I remember this
Yes.
meeting, if you would? We're looking forward to it. Okay,
least I'm
roll call
planning
vote,
on being
beginning with,
president next year.
beginning with Mark
Aye.
and Tom?
Aye.
Jeanette?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Sama?
Aye.
Aye.
Bill?
Nay,
And Mark?
you already voted.
Very good. Okay, motion carries 6-1. Thank you, Darren.
You don't get two.
Okay. Mayor, can I ask for just a couple of items of clarification on some things that Greg had given us during our meetings?
Sure.
Okay. Just want to make sure that we've got everything in place so that something doesn't pop up as we're trying to get this done. In all the state codes and the city codes that he'd given us, there was one that said we had to submit in writing to the clerk. Greg, do we have to do that?
Your Honor, this isn't on the agenda. Darren can simply come in and we can go
Yeah.
through the items. This really isn't appropriate for the agenda.
Wouldn't be a part of this motion or this process or the voting, so that's a slight technicality.
Okay, all righty. I had another couple other items that I needed to clarify just so that we are knowing where we're going.
Okay?
Okay.
You got time and place. Is there anything else you need?
Those really he just needs to make an appointment and come in and we can clarify those items that were submitted.
You okay with that?
Okay, well, there are things that I'd like to have had put on or that the council would know, but I guess if Greg wants it that way, then. we'll
Not
go
on the
that.
agenda, so it would be in a sense out of order.
Okay,
So,
all righty.
Hey,
Thank you
thanks for
very
your
much.
time.
We appreciate it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I would ask Pastor Gabriel Leon and Mr. Kent Ferris to come to the podium. This has to do with an item that was on the consent agenda that we didn't really pull off the consent agenda. We're just giving a little bit of extra attention to this, and it's regarding a proclamation. And these gentlemen are here tonight to explain a little bit about their effort in a document that's entitled First Report for the Chin Burmese Congregation here in our area. So, Kent?
My name is Kent Ferris. I live in Muscatine. By way of my responsibilities with our church, I first met Pastor Gabriel Darlien Mang, pastor of the Iowa Chin Baptist Church in Columbus Junction. I consider Pastor Gabriel a valuable colleague and friend. As far back as Governor Robert Ray's administration, the state of Iowa has been a leader in accepting the stranger, making accommodations for refugees from around the world who've been displaced from their home and homeland because of war, famine, and other tragedy. And to this day, Iowa is a welcoming community for refugees, whether they be from Iraq, the countries of Africa, or Burma, what is also known as Myanmar. The U.S. State Department reviews requests for resettlement and works with local agencies in helping people reestablish in our communities. And what we have found is that there are approximately 500 Burmese refugees living in our neighbor's town, Columbus Junction, very near us. While learning of this process and of the resettlement efforts, I met Pastor Gabriel. He is both a former refugee and now a community leader, both within his faith community as well as the greater Columbus Junction community. As I'd mentioned, the Burmese refugee community is approximately 500. They have a long history that connects them with Columbus Junction in ways that other communities don't. As far back as 1860, there was a missionary from Columbus Junction who traveled to Burma. And to hear Pastor Gabriel tell the story, 98% of his country is Christian, and they attribute that to the efforts of those early missionaries. So not only is it a matter of refugees settling where there are others like them, but it is a spiritual home, and the word used to describe is a Jerusalem of sorts for their community. Over Labor Day weekend, Pastor Gabriel and his faith community will be gathering along with 10 other churches in the Midwest for the Mid-American Chin Christian Fellowship gathering in Muscatine. So there will be 1,000 visitors to our city during that weekend, both for spiritual as well as recreational and social opportunities. As a member of a faith community in Muscatine, I would encourage those of other faiths to join in prayer for safekeeping and for a positive experience in our community. And I would also thank both the city administrator and the mayor's office, as well as the Chamber of Commerce and media in town for the reception that we've received so far in advance of that gathering. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for giving us a little insight, Kent. At this time, I'd like to read a proclamation, Mid-America Chin Christian Fellowship Day. Whereas the state of Iowa has been a leader in making accommodations for refugees from around the world who have been displaced from their home and homeland because of war, famine, and other tragedies, and there is a growing Burmese population in the state of Iowa and in our neighboring community of Columbus Junction, Iowa, which has a population of between 400 and 500 refugees, and there is a long history linking their home country and their new hometown that is based in early missionaries from Columbus Junction who worked in Burma, and Pastor Gabriel Lean, pastor of the Iowa Chin Baptist Church in Columbus Junction, and those within his faith community play a large part in bridging the refugee community to a greater community. And Pastor Leon and his congregation are organizing the Mid-America Chin Christian Fellowship Gathering in Muscatine, and it's scheduled to take place Friday, August 30th, 2013, through Monday, September 2nd, 2013, utilizing the YMCA, high school sports fields, and Spring Valley Bible Camp. And the fellowship gathering is expected to bring refugees from 11 regional churches together for worship, fellowship, and recreation, which is expected to have a positive impact on the local community. Now, therefore, I, Dwayne Hopkins, Mayor of the City of Muscatine, Iowa, do hereby claim Saturday, August 31st, 2013 as Mid-America Chin Christian Fellowship Day in the City of Muscatine, Iowa. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, continuing on with our council meeting this evening, we're going to move to item number 7 on your agenda, public hearing. This public hearing concerns the proposed vacation of public right-of-way in the city of Muscatine. The property owners who reside at 305 Burnside are requesting the sale and transfer of a 20-foot wide unimproved alley remnant located behind their home. The vacation of the remnant would allow for the construction of a detached garage. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously approved the request with the provision the entire unimproved alley remnant be sold to avoid leaving the city with any landlocked property. Prior to any formal action by City Council, a public hearing is required. Now is the time for the public to comment. Is there anyone that wishes to comment?
Move to close.
Very good. Motion to close, Tom, and a second, Scott. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried 7-0. Item B. This public hearing concerns the proposed vacation of utility easements in the Riverbend Section Addition. The property owner is requesting the vacation of existing utility easements along and between lots 9 and 10 in the addition to allow for the construction of a new residence. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously approved the request. Prior to any formal action by City Council, a public hearing is required. Now is the time for the public to comment. Anyone care to comment?
Move to close.
Motion to close, Scott.
Second, Your Honor.
Second, Bob. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. And skipping down to item 11 from the city administrator. Presented for City Council's consideration is the first reading of an ordinance vacating public right-of-way in the city of Muscatine. The property owners who reside at 305 Burnside are requesting the sale and transfer of a 20-foot wide unimproved alley remnant located behind their home. The vacation of the remnant would allow for the construction of a detached garage. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously approved the request, which, with the provision the entire unimproved alley remnant be sold to avoid leaving the city with any landlocked property. Is there a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance as submitted?
So moved.
Jeanette. Second, anyone?
Second.
Second, Osama. Any discussion? This is a roll call, beginning with Jeanette.
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Osama?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And Tom?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Item B, presented for City Council's consideration is a resolution approving the vacation of utility easements in the Riverbend Second Addition. The property owner is requesting the vacation of existing utility easements along and between lots 9 and 10 in the addition to allow for construction of a new residence. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously approved the request. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
Tom?
Second.
Second, Osama. Any discussion, council? Roll call, beginning with Tom.
Aye.
Jeanette.
Aye.
Bob.
Aye.
Osama.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
And Mark.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Item C, presented for City Council's consideration is a resolution approving the cost estimate and setting the bid opening date for T-hanger apron drainage improvements at the municipal airport. The project will include removing an existing French drain system and installing storm sewer intakes, storm sewer, and an inlet upstream of a proposed septic system manhole or existing oil and/or water separator. Is there a motion to approve or to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved.
I think that was Phil.
Second.
Second, Mark. Any discussion, council? Another roll call, beginning with Phil.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Jeanette.
Aye.
Bob.
Aye.
Osama.
Aye.
And Scott.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Item D. Presented for City Council's consideration is a resolution awarding the contract for the Dawson Street Reconstruction Project. A total of 6 bids were received, with the lowest responsible bid from All American Concrete in the amount of $195,607.52. The engineer's estimate was $273,331.81. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved.
Scott?
Second.
Second, Tom. Any discussion, council?
I do have a question. Does anybody have any insight why the variance is so great?
Come on up, John, but I believe All American Concrete is working on the current, is it the CSO project, John?
Yeah, they probably.
John Lutz, city engineer. All American Concrete bid this pretty tight, and their bids were almost the low bid on all of the items. The other contractors may have been low on a few of them, but they varied considerably and were considerably higher on other items. All American is already in town working on West Hill. I've been told that they don't have a lot of work coming up, and it fit into their schedule real good. There's other firms have some work, and so they'll bid higher on it.
I think you answered my second question, is what is meant by the lowest responsible bid?
Yeah. So, they've done, they did the paving, All American did paving on Clay Street.
Yep.
They were successful on that. And they've been working on West Hill, and they've done a fine job there, too.
Thank you.
Anyone else, council?
There's someone out there that wants to
Yeah.
speak.
Would you like to come up to the microphone, ma'am? Tell us your name and your address.
My name is Alice Hughes. I live at 215 Brook Street. If a group of veterans got together, would they have priority over these people in the bidding of doing these sidewalks? I found that what's been done now, as I look at my pretty poor job, and I've seen other people do excellent jobs where I don't trip on it every time I go. So I'm wondering if I, as a disabled veteran, 100%, and I was in a construction firm, could I make a bid at this point, or is the bidding over?
Bidding's over.
Okay, thank you.
I think is the bidding process concluded already? So to respond to your question, keep your eyes open for the next one, ma'am, maybe?
Sure, because I'll be having them together.
I had one comment was, we had a discussion, I was kind of informed that we had a discussion at budget time about sidewalks, and this particular Dawson Street reconstruction that goes from Hauser Street to Dawson Extension, I guess, is the new Dawson. There are no sidewalks currently, and there will be no sidewalks. And from Hauser Street to this new addition, Dawson, if it had sidewalks, would facilitate children walking to West Middle School from that Allen Street area, Hauser Street area. The problem that I have had over the years is how to pay for the sidewalks. And since we've did a trail on Cedar Street, and we're doing sidewalks as part of the Colorado Street project, I think it's been made pretty clear that we're not pushing residents to pay for their sidewalks anymore that are in front of their house. They will need to maintain them, but they do not have to pay that like the others have. So I would suggest that possibly we look at an alternative to this. They have this bid, but also look at the possibility of going ahead and installing sidewalks along Dawson. It's a two block area, I think. And obviously the engineer's estimate was 273 and the bid came in under 200,000. So we've got, from the estimate down, we've got over $75,000 to put in sidewalks on two sides of the street. I think that the thing I always had a problem with was we're putting sidewalks in without having the residents paying for them on these two major projects. Here's another project that we're doing, And now we're not gonna put sidewalks on because we, council, have not decided who's going to be paying for sidewalks. Well, I think we've already done that. We've
Well, that-
established that.
I think that brings up two matters. I think the council previously passed a resolution that said we would design streets using the complete streets concept. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that includes sidewalks. Is that fair?
Complete streets concept would be consideration of all of those complete streets concepts, not necessarily implementation during a project.
Okay.
There was a question, was there two
Yeah,
questions?
yeah, I just noted that we passed a resolution
yes.
saying we were going to take that approach. The other issue is basically what Phil said, and I'd underscore it. We need a policy so that we have a process and we do it every time. You know, we need a sidewalk policy that addresses these matters.
Ma'am,
Ma'am,
if you're going to speak, you have to come to the microphone. It's a matter of record, please. That's okay.
Alice Hughes, 215 Brook.
Thank you.
I've tripped on these sidewalks and practically broke my hip because of the poor quality, especially downtown. I usually walk downtown. That's my main 2nd Street. Then I turn 3rd Street up a block, and then I go up to the library. And that's usually my route of going. I can trip so many times, and the new ones are no better. Whoever's putting those out over here on 3rd Street are doing a poor job, because anytime you're going to have to shovel that snow, it's going to get caught in those crevices. The best ones are the old kind that were poured years ago, and they're poured kind of flat. They don't necessarily have to have that much of a hole in it. They don't have to breathe. It don't seem like they have to breathe because it's concrete. With that asphalt, you have to have a place where it can breathe. Those ones at the courthouse that are just being made, I think they're poorly done with those holes in them so people can trip. Now, I have a book on how to make a community good for elderly on up, from 100 on up to a woman pushing her stroller, which you see much of the time. She's gonna trip. So what are those holes doing there, and why are those people putting them there when eventually they're gonna have to be paved over so that people can, if people become conscious of the fact that we're in age difference there between, we're having a new boom of teenagers coming back and babies coming back and elderlies all sharing the same community. And so if we advance the idea that we want our streets together, we want our roads, and we want our transportation, which is not on the table, we're talking about sidewalks, but sidewalks are important because a lot of people would rather walk, older people want to walk, younger people really like walking and running, and it's a tripping hazard, and believe me, I've tripped.
Thank you, ma'am.
Your Honor.
And if you would, the group that you represent, if you would share any of that information that you would like to with John at the end of the council meeting tonight?
I guess it's AARP.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay. Motion made by Scott, seconded by Tom. This is a roll call vote, beginning with Scott.
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Jeanette?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
And Osama?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Item E, presented for City Council's consideration is a resolution accepting completed work for the Mad Creek Sewer Extension Project. In October 2012, the contract for this project was awarded to Cornerstone Excavating in the amount of $994,414.75. There were two change orders resulting in a decrease of $13,593 and quantity adjustments resulting in a decrease of $28,282.78 for a final construction cost of $952,538.97. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved.
Jeanette?
Second.
Second, Scott, or Mark, is that you? Okay, and discussion, council? Beginning with Jeanette, roll call.
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Osama?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And Tom?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Item F, presented for City Council's consideration is a resolution approving a mortgage release for 1812 Schiller Street. The property owner participated in the 2006 Community Development Block Grant Housing Rehabilitation Program, receiving the maximum $24,999 in funding assistance through a 5-year forgivable loan. The mortgage was signed on January 30th, 2008, and the project completed on July 21st, 2008. The entire $24,999 debt on this project is now forgiven. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
Bob.
Second?
Second, Jeanette. Any discussion, council? Beginning with Bob.
Aye.
Osama?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And Jeanette?
Aye.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item G, presented for City Council's consideration is a resolution setting a public hearing on the Colorado Street Improvement Project. The proposed reconstruction of Colorado Street includes a new turn lane from Park Avenue onto Colorado, a stop island at University Drive, a three-lane urban section road design, a new box culvert, storm and sanitary sewer, water main replacement, private utility relocations, and new sidewalks. The design incorporates the complete streets concept, which allows for multi-module transportation. The estimate cost is $2.95 million. Prior to any formal action by City Council, a public hearing is required. This hearing will take place on Thursday, August 15th, 2013, at 7 p.m. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
Tom?
Second.
Second, Scott. Any discussion? Beginning with Tom?
Aye.
Jeanette?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Osama?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
And Mark?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Item H, at this time, and this is not an action item, we'd like to welcome to the podium Mr. Bob Veenstra of Veenstra and Kim, who will provide a review of the 2013 sewer rate study with potential action taking place at the August 15th, 2013 City Council meeting. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Your Honor, members of the council, I'd like to spend a few minutes going over the sewer rate study. We looked at both the rates, the sanitary sewer rate that's really used to fund the operations of the water pollution control plant and lift stations, as well as the collection and drainage fee, which really pays for operation and capital costs associated with the collection and drainage and storm water system. A little bit of background. About 10 years ago, the City Council changed their approach in looking at sewer rates. Prior to that, every year as a part of the budget process, rates were set. 10 years ago, we moved to a program where we look longer term and set the rates for projection of 3 to 5 years out into the future, trying to avoid large rate increases, but trying to keep rates current with what expenditures are. And then about 5 years ago, we split the sanitary sewer rate and the collection and drainage and created these two rates. And so we really, they're separate, but you really need to look at them as a whole. I'm going to start with the sanitary sewer fee. What's happened over the last 4 years is the rates have gone up at a uniform 3% a year. That was really set when we put in place the financing for the recently completed improvement project to the water pollution control plant. The last rate study looked through June 30th of this year, so the last rate increase was effective July 1 of 2012. And the intent was at the end of that period, or the end of this recently completed fiscal year, we would be about in a break-even position. So when we looked at what's occurred over the last 5 years, the first 3 years of that 5-year period, which would be up through June 30th, 2011, the fund was generally gaining every year. Now, there was a few anomalies related to 2008 and expenditures that were reimbursed the following year, but overall, it was gaining some money, and that's what was projected, because we still hadn't incurred all of the debt service for the water pollution control plant. What's happened the last 2 years is that we've had expenses that have exceeded revenues. And that expenses have been up some from what we projected 5 years ago. But it's really related to one component, is that 2 years ago, or at the beginning of the 2010-11 fiscal year, 11-12 fiscal year, we made an adjustment in transfers. Out of the sanitary sewer rate, each year out of that fund, $200,000 is transferred over to the West Hill Sewer Project. And we decrease the amount of money we transfer over to set aside for future improvements at the water pollution control plant because we just completed a project and we didn't need as much money. If you factor those two together, that increased the expenditures in the fund over the last 2 years by $130,000 a year. And if you look at the recently completed fiscal year where our expenses exceeded revenue by about $147,000, and you factor out that $130,000 transfer, we would have had a loss of about $17,000 on $4.5 million. The projection was to break even. So I think overall, the analysis shows that we're on the correct trend. We always anticipated that there would probably be a continuation of rate adjustments because every year we have increases in our operational expenditures. We really have three components of expenditures. One are the operational expenditures, the other is debt service, and the other is transfers. So if we take where we are today and we look at what expenses are projected to be, we know what the debt service will be, and we set the transfers. If we look forward, we're going to have an annual loss every year going forward. And what will happen is right now we can absorb those through the fund balance because we're carrying roughly $1.7 million. But if we project forward a couple of 3 years, we'll get to the point where our fund balance will be getting below where it should be, and about 4 years from now, we'll have a negative fund balance. So if we continue the current trend, it's really unsustainable over the long term. So we really have two fundamental choices. We either have to reduce our expenditures down to our revenues, or we need to look at how we adjust our revenues. If we take the scenario of what could we do to reduce the expenditures down to revenues, well, we can't really do anything with debt service. That's already fixed. It's a little hard to have much leverage on the operational expenditures at the water pollution control plant. We need to meet the permit limits. We can't just say we're not going to treat sewage 2 days a month or something to reduce the expenditures. So those are locked in. So really our only discretion that we have on the expenditure side is, do we not transfer money to the West Hill project? Well, if we don't transfer it out of here, it's got to come from someplace else, so we need to find another source for that $200,000. Or we don't set aside money for capital improvements at the water pollution control plant that transfer to the reserve fund. And at some point, then we won't have money for those improvements, and we'll be back looking for another way to fund those. So other than funding these capital projects, there's not a lot of things we can do. So you always have the choice of saying we're not going to make those transfers, we're going to bring the expenses down to revenues. But we need to think about what will occur if we don't set that money aside today for capital projects. At some point, those projects will need to be done, and we'll just be looking for an alternative source. So we also looked at what options would be available if we continued the trend of trying to adjust rates modestly to keep up with our expenditures. And we looked at two scenarios this time. One is a little bit larger increase coming up in this current fiscal year to try to catch us up, to get back to close to a break even by the end of the current fiscal year or in the next fiscal year. To do that, we need a 6% increase and then follow it every year by a 2 to 3% increase. And that would put us back in a break-even position in a little over a year. But the sense was that increase of 6% may be just a little too much up front. So we also looked at a scenario of continuing the 3% annual increases that we've been doing. What it'll mean is that we'll have a loss each year for the next 3 years, and about the fourth year we'll break even, and we'll start to gain a little bit in the fifth year. But we, I think, have the flexibility to do that because when we look at the fund balance, we're carrying about $1.7 million. It's a little bit more than we probably need, based on good guidelines, of somewhere carrying around 30 to 35% of your expenditures every year. So we probably have a little bit extra money in the fund balance right now. So the thought is that we could slowly increase rates, not have that one-time 6% increase. We're going to lose about $300,000 out of the fund balance over the next 4 years. But all that's going to do is bring us back down to where we think is a reasonable level. Our risk and exposure over the next 3 to 4 years is pretty low. There's no new regulations coming in effect. We've just completed a major project at the Water Pollution Control Plant. So unlike where we were a few years ago, we were at risk for major things breaking down. I think that risk is actually much lower today. What we're seeing would be capital projects that are planned and a little farther out on the horizon. So we think this may be the opportunity to maybe get that fund balance down a little bit closer to what would be considered a good number, and yet then just avoid that need for a one-time bump in rates. What that does is, as I indicated in the letter, right now the average residential charge, which should be, if we took all the revenue from the residential customers and divided it by the customers, is $20.95 per month. That doesn't mean that that's what everybody's paying, that's just on average. And as shown in the table, that's really pretty competitive. And I would note that although the example shows that Coralville is lower, Coralville has facing a major improvement to its water pollution control plant, much like we were 4 or 5 years ago. So if we look in the crystal ball and say what's likely to happen to Coralville, by the time they fund their project, they're going to be probably more in line with where we are or other communities. So we've been able to keep the rates very competitive, and even with the rate increase this coming year, we'll still be very competitive. And even if you look down the road to the 5th year of 2017-2018, that average rate of 24.25 still is pretty competitive by the group, considering that a lot of those other communities will probably adjust their rates also sometime in the next 4 to 5 years. So we're throwing out for the council's consideration that if we were to look at a multi-year, 5-year rate structure, 3% per year, it would put us back to the point where we would be break even to gaining a little bit of money in the 4th and 5th year. To do that, we'll buy down the fund balance a little bit, but we'll still remain in very good place. We'll be able to continue the transfers to the West Hill Sewer Project, set the money aside we need for capital improvements that are planned at the Water Pollution Control Plant. The alternatives are we either have a different rate structure or we look at cutting back those transfers in order to bring our expenses down. The second thing we looked at is the collection and drainage. Collection and drainage is kind of a blend. We pay some operational expenses, but mostly that fund pays capital expenses for projects and equipment that are related to collection and drainage in the storm sewer. So there's a West Hill transfer, we buy equipment for public works out of that. That fund generates about $1 million a year, and a little bit less than $200,000 of that is related to operational expenses, personnel and those kind of things. The balance of that fund goes to some kind of capital expenditure, either into a fund for the projects or we'll do it to buy equipment. So when we look at the collection and drainage fee, we need to kind of look longer term because those capital projects, we don't buy the same amount of capital expenditure every year, so it kind of goes up and down. But if we look sort of down the road several years, the collection and drainage is actually doing fairly well. Like the sanitary sewer fund, it has one unexpected change in the last 5 years, and that was 2 years ago when we implemented the $200,000 per year transfer to the West Hill project. Unlike the sanitary sewer fund, the collection and drainage actually is able to absorb a goodly piece of that within the existing rate structure. But if we look down the road and keep those transfers going and look at expenditures, if we didn't do anything with the collection and drainage rate, which is now $11 per month, by the time we get out 4 or 5 years, we're going to be pretty dangerously low on the fund balance. And we'll be needing to look, do we have to cut back some of the capital expenditures, either equipment or transfers, by the time we get out there 4 or 5 years. So we looked at 3 scenarios for collection and drainage. One is to do nothing, keep the rate at $11. The fund would remain solvent for the next several years, but by the time we get out to that 2017-18, we'd be pretty much scraping the bottom of the barrel, and probably at that point needing to look at a larger increase because we know there's some capital expenditures beyond 2018. We looked at a 2% increase in the fund, thinking that that helps us get the fund balance, keeps it a little bit stable. It'll still come down a little bit, but still remain pretty solvent over the next 5 years. We also then looked at a 3% increase. 3% increase puts a little bit more money in the fund balance at the end of the 5 years. But right now, I don't think we have identified capital projects that would really tell us that we need that extra 1%. That the 2% seems to be the best place to be. So we're looking, again, when you look at the no increase, the 2% per year, and the 3% per year, I think this is, the 2% seems to best fit what that fund could do as far as maintaining the fund balance. What that would do is that the $11 fee would go to $11.20. We sort of round everything to the nearest nickel, so if you take the $11 and tell me that going up 3% on $11 doesn't come out to $11.20, you're right, but we do round everything to the nearest nickel. So over the next 5 years, it would go from $11 to $12.15. Now, for both of the funds, as we look longer term beyond 2018, we'll be back again at the end of the 5 years looking at what we need to do. But we think at this point, working with staff, that we've got a pretty good projection of what's going to occur over the next 5 years. And then when we look longer term in the next 5 years, we don't see any really significant changes that we would need to start looking at in this 5-year period. So the years 6 through 10 look like sort of a continuation, so we don't see any real ominous signs on the horizon that would say we need to do something different. So I think we're looking at what's the best way to maintain the solvency of the fund and yet be able to fund the capital and operational expenses that the council has either decided is appropriate or we need to do because we have really little choice. So those are kind of the overview on what we're suggesting for your consideration, and we recognize it's entirely your prerogative, but we think looking at it that a continuation of the annual increase concept makes sense. We would suggest that 3% per year in the sanitary sewer rate would make the most sense of the 3 alternatives we looked at. And likewise, we think that 2% per year, rounded to the nearest nickel, would make the most sense looking at the collection and drainage fee and how that works within the collection and drainage fund. And with that, Your Honor, I'm available for any questions.
Very good. Council, any questions for Mr. Veenstra?
Very helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you, Bob. Okay, back to the agenda. We are on item 8, item I. Presented for City Council's consideration is a request to approve amendment number 2 to the contract with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources for diesel emission reductions. Earlier this year, the City Council approved the acceptance of a grant funding for clean diesel equipment for transit buses and street department vehicles. Following pre-testing, it was learned that 4 of the transit vehicles were not eligible for reduction equipment. The city requested permission to utilize the funding for replacement of transit vehicles instead, which the IDNR agreed to. The amount of grant funding being offered is $155,988.46. The cost for a new comparable replacement is $94,374 each, or $188,748 for the purchase of 2 buses, with the city's share being $32,759.54. Funding for the local match will come from the transit fund balance and expected savings in bus maintenance. Is there a motion to approve the request as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
That was Tom.
Second.
Second, Scott. Any discussion, council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Item J, presented for city council's consideration is a request to authorize the issuance of a purchase order for a crane at the transfer station. 2 bids were received, with the low bid from Crane Equipment Manufacturing Corporation in the amount of $165,650. However, their crane options do not meet project specifications. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation the bid from North Shore Manufacturing Incorporated in the amount of $177,370 be approved. There is $171,500 budgeted through an internal loan payment of $35,000 over the next 5 years. Because of the increased cost of the crane, the first payment this fiscal year will be increased to $35,500, and for the remaining 4 years, the budget will be amended to include a payment of $35,600. Is there a motion to approve the request as submitted?
So moved.
Jeanette? Second.
Second.
Scott? Any discussion, council?
Was that the budgeted item during budget
Yes, it was.
for the amount of 165?
171.5.
171.
71.
I don't,
That's the need for the increase in the budget amended by $100
Thank you.
per payment, sorry.
Any other discussion?
has this crane been in there since the inception? Okay. That's my only question.
Is that it? Okay. Voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Item K, presented for city council's consideration, is a request to approve supplemental agreement number 1 with Stanley Consultants for the West Hill Sewer Separation Project. During the course of phases 1 and 2 of this project, additional design, bidding, and construction services were requested and needed that exceeded the original scope of services. This work included sanitary and storm sewer design work with the associated pavement improvements designed to the 3rd Street parking lot outside of the construction area, sidewalk, and street profile upgrades, preparation of 11 easement plats, and amending bidding documents. The cost for these services is $42,000. Is there a motion to approve the request as submitted?
So move.
Scott, in a second.
Second.
Second, Mark. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Item L, presented for city council's consideration, is a request to approve change order number 2 for the Bond Schley Pump Station renovation project. This change order is an increase of $6,052.28. The project is complete and ready to be closed out. This change order brings the total project cost to $303,484.28. Is there a motion to approve the request as submitted?
So move, Your Honor.
Bob, and a second?
Second.
Second, Jeanette. Any discussion, council? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Carries 7-0. Item M, presented for city council's consideration, is a request to approve an urban renewal agreement with Muscatine County. Muscatine County has been working with Van Meter Incorporated to designate their property located at the intersection of Cedar Street and the bypass as an urban renewal area by developing and adopting the urban renewal plan. Following the recent adoption of the plan, the county entered into a tax increment rebate agreement with Van Meter. Since the property is located within 2 miles of the corporate limits of Muscatine, the city must also approve an agreement with the Muscatine County to enable the county to exercise urban renewal powers within the urban renewal area. Is there a motion to approve the request as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
Bill?
Second, Your Honor.
Second, Osama. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Item 14, it is now time for communication from city council members, and we'll begin with Councilman Loretz.
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier tonight, and for the second time in as many meetings, we had to discuss and make motion on the fire department's MDA boot drive. During that discussion, you heard myself and several other councilors express disappointment that the organizers of that particular event have had several years to come up with a transition plan to move it off the city streets, and they've been slow to do so. But at least in their case, while I'm disappointed with them, I can understand that they want to collect as much money as possible for the event because it's a cause they're devoted to. My disappointment is much greater with the publisher of our local newspaper. Every week, we have a member of the local paper come and cover our meetings, and they write a story. They actually attend the meeting and write a story, and shockingly enough, the information they put in there is usually what happened in the meeting. It's accurate. It's what we voted. But on July 27th, the publisher of our local paper decided to write what he dubbed an editorial. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I just wanted to highlight that there's mention in here that either someone in Muscatine with some influence complained to the administrator and council about those pesky firefighters blocking traffic, or the city was looking for a way to anger and demoralize the firefighters and its citizens. I don't know who this heavy hitter would be. I certainly didn't hear from the individual, and I'm happy to report that Councilman Fitzgerald and I did not get together before last meeting to discuss how we could best peeve off our firefighters. The reason council voted the way it did, and I guess I can only speak for myself, I'm making an assumption, but it's because we want to be responsible with our resources. We don't want to take unnecessary risk. And our firefighters and our emergency personnel are some of the most important resources we have. And so we don't want to put them at unnecessary risk. There was recently a survey that came out that showed that trust in what people read in the newspaper is now at 27%. 27% of the people surveyed said they believed what they read in the newspaper. This right here is a classic example of why that is the case. This was not an editorial. It was garbage. I would challenge Mr. Jameson to actually attend a meeting, be it regular, in-depth, budget, because in 4 years I've never seen him. And if he wants to know how I or any other member of this council have voted and why, that he actually pick up his phone or email and ask us. Our information is on the city website. It's not hard to find at all. This was a very sensitive issue. There are a lot of strong opinions on the issue. But you would expect someone writing for the local newspaper where people are hoping to get accurate information would be responsible enough to cross-check and verify their facts. Thank you.
Bill?
I hate to do it, but I'd like to go back to the Dawson Street project, and that Tom brought up the fact that the city needs to establish a policy. And I applaud that we've had not necessarily a policy, but a self-imposed policy up to this point of who's currently paying for sidewalks. And I would like to see something accomplished here so that we can figure out how we can get the sidewalks included in the project on Dawson so that we have the same scenario, I don't care who pays. I personally think the residents along the street that's being improved need to pay for the sidewalks that are in front of their property. But I think the city council needs to establish a policy sooner than later on sidewalks, especially new sidewalks. Infill sidewalks, repair of sidewalks. The stuff we were talking about at budget time, when we were talking about hiring an additional engineer, doesn't establish the policy on sidewalks. It was a review of current existing conditions and where we need infill and all of that kind of stuff. That's great, but we weren't willing as a council to fund that position. But I think we need to have some discussion quickly on what a policy ought to be for sidewalks within the city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Phil. Scott?
I have nothing, thank you.
Osama?
Just a comment here. I would like to wish Council Member Bynum here, no pun intended, Bob, a happy birthday today. That's all.
Anything else? No, that's all. Councilman Bynum, happy
Nothing.
birthday, by the way.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor. Thank you.
Jeanette?
Nothing, thank you.
Tom?
Just to take a moment to expand on Phil's conversation. I said policy, or I also meant plan. I think, you know, it's fine to establish a policy, but there needs to be a forward look at what we want those streets to look like. There needs to be some intelligent design that says we need sidewalks there because there's traffic there. You know, so yes, it is a policy, but there also needs to be a plan, which I expect could show up as part of the comprehensive plan, that sort of thing. But it needs to be well thought out, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Greg?
As to sidewalks, just a FYI, staff and I, we've been talking about, how to put that plan together coming forward, following our discussion of budget in the next couple meetings. You should see that process of how to bring that plan or that policy to fruition coming forward. So expect to see that shortly.
Fran?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Very good. My comments would be somewhat reflective of Councilman Lorette's. I had a brief email discussion with the publisher / editor of the Muscatine Journal myself. Was not thrilled about the My View is this column, and it appeared last Saturday in the Journal, of course, and totally incomplete. His view, I believe he's been in the Muscatine area about 3 years now. I invited him via email to become a part of the process. His response to that invitation was that he feels his opinion is part of the process. I personally don't necessarily agree with that, but again, it makes for a very healthy community. Again, happy birthday to Councilman Bynum. Sacrificed his birthday night to become a part of the process, if you will. So, that's all of my comments. Any other business, council?
So moved.
A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Sama. Meeting is adjourned.